All right, welcome everybody. Regan here, and so happy to have you on Never Stop Healing. Today is going to be a very interesting discussion because we're going to talk about the root cause of so many conditions that so many of us have to deal with day in and day out, and it's something that I've spent a lot of time digging into over the years, and so as I dive in, I just I'd like you to picture yourself by the end of this in the next 30 minutes. What you'll see is a new insight on your blood sugar. And so this will be key. I'm going to talk about some of the key herbs, key peptides, and just the key ingredients that can really help stave off some of the most damaging conditions that we can undergo, which is this insulin resistant stage. And so let's see how everyone is rating. First of all, I'm going to ask you some questions. How many of you know what insulin resistance is and are familiar with it? I'm sure many of you do, but let's just kind of look at your overall, kind of health right now, and we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the conditions that can show up with insulin resistance. And so, how many of you, first of all, have noticed that you have a little more fat around your belly than you'd like? And how many of you have high blood pressure or a family history of heart disease? Now, this is where a lot of people don't recognize the fact is that a lot of the hypertension, a lot of the blood pressure that goes on in our society actually is a result of having insulin resistance. So how many of you have high levels of blood triglycerides? Do you retain water easily? Do you have patches of darker colored skin or little bumps in the skin called skin tags in your neck or armpits or other areas? I mean, this is a big one. And do you have polycystic ovarian syndrome or erectile dysfunction? And then finally, do you have a family member with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes? Because with some of these questions, you may say, well, yeah, I have family members who have it. Well, today, what my goal is to show you some ways that you can dramatically improve your body's overall healing response by looking for this hidden issue called insulin resistance. And it's one of those silent killers. There's I'm going to share my slides here for those of you who'd like to see, but there's this interesting thing that happens in our bodies as our bodies lose insulin sensitivity. Because insulin, if it's functional, it's actually one of the most powerful metabolic hormones that we've got. And many of you who, I'm obviously not a bodybuilder, but I've worked with several bodybuilders in my clinic and help coach and advise them with our team. And one of the things that they use is insulin as an anabolic hormone, just like you can use anabolic steroids that actually help increase your body mass. And I'm not recommending anyone do that, by the way, but what I'm sharing with you is that insulin is one of the major transporters of nutrients into the muscles. And the number one area of your body, the number one system that depends on insulin sensitivity are your muscles. And so one of the ways that you can rapidly increase your body's insulin sensitivity is by increasing your muscle mass. And so this morning I was in the gym with Michael Banks, and he's just been a great trainer for me. And he'll be on the show very soon. You guys will hear about my kind of 45-day body reset that I've done, along with our 60-day reset. I've been doing kind of some additional, kind of muscle building and doing some different training that I've never done before, and it's been really fun. But one of the keys that I've made the commitment to, and one of the reasons why we put you on the 60-day reset right at the beginning of your program, is because you get off sugar. And that sugar is a killer for so many of us, because what it does is it impedes our body's ability to have insulin and transporting glucose into the cells. Because once the insulin does that, this amazing thing happens where you start getting amino acid building, and you have better digestion and emulsification of fats as well. So if you look at your hemoglobin A1c, and I know many of you ran your labs, if you have not had this tested recently, I'm just going to tell you, get this done. Even if you're on peptides right now, if you're doing the cell core detoxification in our 60-day reset, whatever it might be, do not postpone looking at your hemoglobin A1c, because what we find is that the rate of heart disease, it increases the more insulin resistance you have. So the higher your hemoglobin A1c, the higher your chances are of having heart disease. And one of the things that happens, 50% of people who have heart disease, the very first symptom is a heart attack. And this very thing happened to my dad. And I know you guys have heard me talk about this, but he was at the stage of life where he had his blood work done. He shifted jobs. He moved down to Delta, Utah, and I'm sure it was a super stressful time as I've talked to him about it. This was almost 25 years ago, but he had the chest pain, the pain radiating down his arm, and sure enough, he was just about ready to have a massive heart attack. But luckily, there's an ambulance there, and he ended up getting several stints, and then it took him years to recover his energy levels and reclaim his health. But I can tell you, I'm so glad that my dad didn't get taken out by that, because he's just amazing. Not only is he influential to me as a leader, as someone who just gives me great advice, but also to my kids and all his grandkids. And so, my goal today is to say, well, I know you guys have, you have either kids that you want to be around for, grandkids, maybe some of your kids you don't want to be around for right now, but or you have work projects, you have big goals, you want to travel, you want to experience so much more in life. And so one of the big predictive factors that you can look at it is your hemoglobin A1c, and it's very simple to look at this marker. I mean, it's very well known. So if you look at insulin resistance, the number one thing that you want to look at is there's an energy crisis in the cell. And so it's not as simple as like, well, let's get rid of sugar. In so many cases, you've got a cell danger response occurring in the mitochondria, because the mitochondria are what create ATP, and ATP is like the energy system. And then our bodies have this really cool secondary pathway called the AMPK, and the AMPK can be activated with like cordyceps, or it's activated with MOTS-c, one of my favorite peptides. Even we're finding with the ARA290. So there's some very interesting things that can happen to trigger better insulin sensitivity. But if you go upstream even farther, we say, well, okay, we've got this engine in our cell, and literally you have nanomotors just spin at this vibration in your mitochondria. And then as the mitochondria, we think of them as separate units, but actually you can find these little tunnels that connect the mitochondria together. But the mitochondria are very sensitive to what's going on in your body. And when you go into a cell danger response, because you put too much sugar into your system, for example, and your T lymphocytes go into a coma-like state, then the cell danger response gets activated, and your immune system loses intelligence, because the mitochondria are migrating out of your cells, and they're saying, hey, we need the white blood cells to get to work. We've got a danger response in the body, and Regan's stressed, and so let's go figure out where that danger is. And then that leads to autoimmunity. It can lead to inflammation in the blood vessels. It leads to insulin resistance. It leads to biotoxic accumulation, and downstream, it's what triggers the formation of some of these chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease. And so really, if you look at insulin resistance and you go up a level, you say, well, man, there's so many different factors. And one of the best books I've ever read on this is Benjamin Bickman. And those of you who have read his book, Why We Get Sick, it's an incredible book. And I definitely recommend you pick that up if you've not read it. And Benjamin Bickman, he's a BYU professor. So he's here in Utah. And I love our local dudes doing the great work. University of Utah does phenomenal research as well. So we just have some great academic communities here. But with Benjamin Bickman's work, I started seeing that, wow, there are so many pathways that relate to insulin resistance. And some of these pathways, I mean, the PCB, the phthalates, these plastics that we're consuming, the heavy metals in our water. I even talk about the thyroid, and you guys know the study where drinking fluorinated water for a week can trigger hypothyroidism. And so all these things are very interesting as you start piecing it together, because then we say, well, what's a marker that's downstream that lets us know upstream we've got some biotoxic accumulation, and then you'll have nutrient deficiencies. Nutrient deficiencies can be a big deal with insulin resistance, especially if you're running low on magnesium and low on potassium and high on sodium. That can completely disrupt your insulin sensitivity. And then you have to look at the other inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein and homocysteine. Those all lead to more insulin resistance. So we're finding these three things: the biotoxic interference. We're finding, and that includes the heavy metals, the mold toxicity. That also includes dysregulation of hormones because of biliary duct blockage. Your liver is not detoxified, your lymphs aren't working, your colon. And then the secondary pathway we want to look at is, what are the deficiencies? And there's going to be peptides in our bodies that aren't being expressed, and then hormones that aren't being expressed because of deficiencies of peptides, hormones, nutrients. And then the third thing is making sure that you're getting rid of that inflammatory response, because inflammation, unfortunately, once our cells start to, our blood vessels start to get inflamed, then that's when our liver starts pumping out the cholesterol. And so cholesterol really, as you look at some of the research that's been done on it, we're realizing that cholesterol is not due to eating cholesterol as much as it is a sugar and an insulin resistance reaction. Because when you have blood sugar that's spiking, every time your blood sugar goes up, like let's say you overeat, or you say, well, you know what, I worked hard today, and so I deserve a soda or dessert or whatever it might be. And there's no judgment for me on that, but I'm just telling you, if we could find another way of helping you, celebrate your day without the damage to your body, let's look for that. That will help you stay in the game a lot longer. But what happens is when you eat those things, your blood sugar spikes, and when it spikes, that dramatic influx of insulin and then the rapid drop in blood sugar, then you want more sugar. And you guys all remember the cycle, or you've seen the kid who is super hyper and they're just, pepped up on the sugar, and then boom, they crash. Well, every time you do that, you need something to repair the vessel walls. Those arterial walls get damaged when you have blood sugar fluctuations, which is why 92%. This was in the Journal of Endocrinology. They found 92% of diabetics experience diabetic complications, like blindness is a major one, leading cause of dialysis, so kidney failure. The other thing is cardiovascular events, stroke, and then non-traumatic limb amputation with neuropathy. So these are big deals, but it's because you're damaging the blood vessel wall. And the more you damage your circulatory system, it's almost like if you're trying to water your garden, but you have a hose that's leaking before it actually makes it to the soil. What's going to happen to your garden? Well, your plants are going to start to wither. You're not going to grow the healthy beets that you want. You're not going to have that abundant supply of kale and chard or whatever you're growing, because you're losing the water. Yes, you'll have some kind of yield out of your crop, but not nearly what you'd have if you didn't have those holes in the kinks in the hose. So really, if you look at insulin resistance, what it is it's a malfunctioning insulin or insulin receptor on the cell. And then that leads to this internal starvation. In Chinese medicine, anciently, they would diagnose it as wasting and thirsting disorder, because they noticed that patients who had this, these patients just, over time, they would just be thirsty all the time, but they'd be wasting away. They'd be urinating, drinking, and then they'd sweat profusely. And so it was it was a loss of chi being harnessed. And I look at insulin resistance, and I think all of us, if we look at our energy levels, so chi is like that manifestation when our body is producing energy, or in energy in the universe that's getting converted into matter, because energy and matter is constantly in flux. We can't destroy energy or matter. That's just a constant transformation from one to the other. But what they realized in Chinese medicine is, they said, man, just by observation, the chi is just leaking out of the body. So there's no proper flow of the energy. And I think all of us have experienced that when we've had that low blood sugar moment, and we've seen it in our behavior. We felt it when we just feel like angry, like, man, I've been waiting so long for my food. Like if you're traveling, and I notice, especially when you've got kids, you're like, all right, let's make sure we don't go too long without food, because the hanger can creep in. And so it's a damaging place to be. The other side of it is when your cells are overflowing with glucose. So sometimes your cells, this is when especially in the American society, in the United States, we're consuming about 150 pounds of sugar every single year. And that's pretty scary. And so then our cells get overflowing with glucose. And then pretty soon, all those GLUT transporters, because there's little proteins that come up and dock on the surface of the cell and take glucose in from the insulin. But pretty soon the drivers just get fatigued. I mean, you're just putting them to work nonstop. And this is where exercise is important, because by you exercising, and right now in our 60-day reset, we're having everyone exercise 30 cycles twice a day. So get outside and walk for 30 minutes after dinner, ideally as the sun's setting. Or in the morning as the sun's rising. Make sure you're getting that sun exposure. But then the other thing is getting that 30 minutes of exercise. It actually activates GLUT4 transporters, and that GLUT4 transportation leads to better insulin sensitivity. And so a lot of times we'll couple brand new exercise routines, which is typically in the restorative phase of our Accelerate Wellness programs. But we couple that with, 5-amino-1-MQ, which is a really powerful peptide that actually turns off the NNMT pathway. And we talked about that in a previous show just a couple of weeks ago. So go back and listen to that. It's a deep dive on the weight loss peptides, AOD 9604. We talked about MOTS-c and then 5-amino-1-MQ. But the other place where you can really, that's not talked about often, is the peptide ARA290 for insulin resistance. And the studies actually, one of the studies found that patients who used ARA290 for 28 days, what they found is by the end of 28 days, they found an average drop in hemoglobin A1c of 1% in just 28 days. And every time you drop the hemoglobin A1c just 1%, you actually reverse some of the diabetic complications. You reverse all diabetic complications, by something like 20 to 25%. I need to look exactly at the study to give you the right figure, but just by dropping your hemoglobin A1c by 1%, it's a dramatic improvement in your body's ability to start withstanding some of the damage from the diabetes or insulin resistance. And so it's really powerful. So ARA290, then they got the participants off of the ARA290, and they looked 28 days later, and they found that by using this peptide, they continued to drop in their hemoglobin A1c another percentage point. And so this has been phenomenal. I know we have a Bev. I appreciate that. Yes. So Bev is someone who has been on ARA290, and she's found a significant improvement in her fasting numbers. And so she's but they rise a little bit. So dose it in the afternoon. I think that's a great idea. So yes, target. What is your target A1c? So the best hemoglobin A1c We like to see it between 5.0 and 5.4. That's kind of the sweet spot. We'll go as low as like maybe 4.9, depending on, if you're if you're pretty used to fasting and things like that. But anything below that, it's a hypoglycemic state. And then anything above 5.4 starts to get into that inflammatory zone. So inflammatory markers start to show up from it. So yes. And yes, Bev, for you, the best control is exercise. And because, Bev, I won't dive into your medical history, but yes, exercise actually triggers that GLUT4 transportation where you don't need insulin to bring in glucose. And that's this beautiful, our bodies are so incredible. And that's, when I hear about longevity and the opportunity to live to be like 120, 150, who knows how long, if I don't get taken out by a bus or following kid on a mountain bike or doing something stupid, death by stupidity. I don't think I'm going to have the death by neglect, which is what so many people do. But really, if we can stick around long enough, man, there's so many fascinating things that I learn every year. I mean, if I look back 10 years ago, I just was getting into peptide therapy, just understanding stem cells and understanding senescence and why our bodies age and break down, and just seeing it from a scientific perspective. The first 10 years were looking at it from a mindset perspective and more the Taoist or the Buddhist perspective, and then the Eastern philosophy. But now the last 10 years of just the innovations have been so exciting, the testing we can do, that now we have a really good handle on this capability of living a really long time. And one of my big drivers is I want to live a long time so I can learn more. And so it's kind of funny, learn more, and then I can help more people. And so I really appreciate all of you who have come into my life. And I just want to thank you for being part of my community and part of this overall mission and purpose of getting people as healthy as we can, so we can be more productive, we can serve deeper, we can love the way we feel about our health and our life. And so I just want to just give you guys a shout out, because I know it's not easy. And sometimes we ask you guys to do some pretty crazy things when it comes to your lifestyle and making changes. But I got to say, you guys are just always amazing at taking on the challenge. So let's look at this. So chronic disease. We'll dive in just a little bit more on insulin resistance. Got a few more things I want to share before we finish up. But really, if you look at every chronic disease, can be traced to one single cause, which is insulin resistance. And insulin resistance, in my mind, is, we don't have a great way of testing the cell danger response in the mitochondria. But insulin resistance is that one thing that we can pinpoint. It's not just by looking at your hemoglobin A1c or glucose. You've got to look at your LDH. You also need to look at your C-peptide, your insulin, your fasting insulin. These are all very important. But if we can remove insulin resistance, then you're going to get a better mitochondrial function, and then your body will actually be able to detox. And that's one of the reasons we work on growth hormone, because growth hormone like CJC1295, ipamorelin, IGF-1, tesamorelin, these are critical, because what happens is when you have ideal levels of growth hormone in your body and your IGF-1 is active, you have 600 times more receptor sites for the peptide IGF-1 than you do for insulin. And so what that's doing is it's actually triggering this insulin sensitive environment, which is what we want. We don't want insulin resistance. We want your body to be very sensitive and use glucose as it's needed and not store it as fat. And that is incredible. So awesome. And oh, I appreciate that, Judy. Thanks for coming to Sun River for your seminar. I'm so glad we made it out there. And then Diane, yes, get your blood work done. It's so important to get it done and not, let's not take any chances, because holy smokes, if we can get on top of this one big problem, we get rid of 1,000 problems. You guys, I've been talking about the book Essential by Greg McKeown quite a bit. And essential, there's certain things in health where we kind of tackle the things that aren't necessarily essential. And I know I'm just as guilty of that, because it's kind of like Picasso says, it took me a long time to become Picasso the artist. He had to copy a lot of things and do a lot of things, but now we're realizing that there's such a simpler way of going about treating very complex things. And one of these is getting rid of insulin resistance. And we didn't have the best treatments. We had good treatments, but not the best. But now we've got incredible therapies. So the book that I was referencing is Essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less. Yes, thank you, Shani. And Greg McKeown. It's just such a good book. So snag that if you guys would like. I know I give you two books already today, but I'll try not to overwhelm you too much. But man, I love to read, and I love to just take the time to just absorb and hear someone else's thinking, because man, it gives me great creative insights for how I can be a better practitioner, better leader for my team. So all right, so let's talk about this. So biggest risks, death by cause, cardiovascular risk is, it's just phenomenal, the amount of damage cardiovascular diseases have. And if you survive from heart attacks, then what the average is about $16,000 of out-of-pocket direct expenses that you're going to be paying every single year to manage a disease state. So once again, like, think about the things that you do for your health right now. It's an investment. I think about that every time I'm using my peptides, every time I'm taking my supplements, my herbs, when I'm in the sauna, when I'm working out. It's all an investment. And it's so nice because it's a residual result. And that's what Greg McKeown talks about in his book, Essentialism, is do the things that create a residual result. Like if you reverse hemoglobin A1c, it's not just going to benefit you in that moment, but it's going to benefit you 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And that's really what we're looking at, because that cardiovascular disease, it just dwarfs diseases from cancer, respiratory diseases, or any of the other blood and endocrine diseases. And then once we get over 80, then the real goal is making sure you do not get diabetes in your brain. And that's, type 3 diabetes is what we're looking at Alzheimer's and dementia as being. So make sure you're watching out for that. Another great book, sorry, this is the last one, I promise, but it's called Diabetes Epidemic in You. And so it's very interesting because Joseph Kraft, he also wrote a very interesting and compelling argument about the fact that those with cardiovascular disease, not identified with diabetes or insulin resistance, are simply undiagnosed. So remember, the number one disease that's killing more people than any other disease is cardiovascular disease, and they have like diabetes down there at like number 5. His argument, and I think it's very compelling, his argument shows that cardiovascular disease actually begins with insulin resistance. And so once again, if we can help you avoid the disease that kills more people than anyone, than anything else, then I feel like I've done some good work today, at least. So here's how hypertension occurs with insulin resistance. First of all, hypertension is caused by excess aldosterone. And so what that does is it causes salt and water retention. And this is one of the things you see with, if you're taking prednisone or some medications, you have an increase of aldosterone, and that creates blood vessel wall hypertrophy. The hypertrophy makes the walls thick. And then your sympathetic nervous system activation causes blood vessels to become too narrow. And so think about that. It's this aldosterone, you get salt and water retention, and then your blood vessel walls become too thick. And then what happens is you have this lack of nitric oxide. And this is one of the reasons why in my book I write about beets. Eat your beets, because there's a lot of nitric oxide in there. You get some nitric oxide from celery, and you get it from certain vegetables. But man, it's so important, because that nitric oxide allows your blood vessels to dilate. The other thing that gives you a boost of nitric oxide is oxytocin. And one of the best ways you can stimulate some oxytocin is go give somebody a hug or do something kind every day. And so in our Accelerate Wellness programs, you guys have probably seen that one of the first challenges, like right out of the gates, is like, okay, you're going to do something kind for somebody every single day. And people are like, that's kind of weird. Like, why would you want me to do this? I thought we're like focusing on my health, Reagan. Well, just by doing something nice for somebody and doing an act of kindness, actually you're going to get oxytocin, and that oxytocin is going to lead to better nitric oxide release, which creates better vascularity. Your blood vessels will dilate and you're just going to feel better. How many of you have ever done something really nice for somebody from the heart and have regretted it? I mean, yes, I know there's favors that we do, and especially if you've ever dealt with addicts, like, holy cow, they're asking you for favors all the time. I'm not talking about that kind of act of kindness. I'm just talking about just something genuine where maybe it's a stranger, you do something nice, you push them out of the ditch when they're stuck, or you write a card to that friend who you haven't talked to in a while. Maybe you decide to like last night, I went and filled up my wife's car, and so it is, just a tiny little thing, but it felt good doing it. So I think those are really important, and so that actually is going to help your blood vessels and help prevent cardiovascular disease, which is caused by insulin resistance. So if you're kind of like, oh, this is kind of interesting, why are we doing the act of kindness? That's one of the reasons, and it's just fun to do it. It creates a better life. So here's where I've got a picture of beets, because beets, as nitric oxide gets compressed, it's almost like having a kink in your hose. So one of the big takeaways from today is get some beets, get some better nitric oxide, and then calm down the adrenal response. And so this is where that HPA axis becomes really critical. If we're going to get rid of the insulin resistance in our body, then you've got to calm down that parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So you want to calm down the sympathetic nervous response so you have better vagal tone, less stress in the adrenals, and you'll just feel so much better. So hopefully this has been interesting. I'll just kind of go back to some of the things that we're going to look at. Number one, get your blood work done. And Diane, I'm so glad you're going to give us a call today and get that done. And look at the markers that are the most important markers. If you're going to your doctor, reach out to us and we'll get you a requisite form that you can ask to get these blood labs ran. If you're running them through us, we have this on every panel. We're going to look at all those markers for insulin resistance. But think of insulin resistance as an upstream danger zone. It's something that impacts all of us, and it's that sugar that can cause it. But remember, even if you're stressed, you have cortisol that gets released from your adrenal glands, and right behind cortisol, your liver goes into this process called gluconeogenesis, where we push sugar back into the blood. So then you can have high blood sugar even if you don't eat any sugar. It's just an interesting thing. It's a survival technique that our bodies use. But I can tell you, if you can eliminate the insulin resistance, you do that by all the challenges. Our 60-day reset just kicks things off, and then we have the recharge and restore phase. The peptides that we've seen to be the most dramatic as far as improving the insulin resistance are the ARA 290, the MOTS-c, and then the 5-amino-1-MQ. And then we also see dramatic improvements by using the CJC 1295 and Tesamorelin. These are all very powerful, and you've got to use them with lifestyle, of course, but they speed up the process so we can slow down disease. So that's a big goal of ours. So hopefully this is interesting. Really appreciate you guys, and can't wait to see you or talk to you next time we do. We'll be back here next week, same time. And don't forget, this is our 60-day reset. And so please score yourself. If we don't measure it, we can't manage it next time we do it. So there's 360 points possible in these 6 challenges. So make sure you guys are doing that, and really appreciate you all. And we'll talk next week. Bye-bye.